They said the lake could breathe. At dawn, its surface trembled without wind, as if something beneath exhaled through the water. Filmmaker Eli Kearns didn't believe in folklore. He believed in proof. But when his drone lifted into the fog that morning, what it captured was no trick of light. A vast shadow drifted beneath the mirror-like surface, smooth, deliberate, alive. The water itself seemed to blink, sending ripples outward like a heartbeat. Eli froze, staring at the live feed. The image warped, static bleeding through as a circular glow appeared far below. His drone's sensors failed, compass spinning, battery plummeting to 0 in seconds. Then the screen went black. When he replayed the footage, a faint pulse of light shimmered deep under the surface. Steady, organic, like the beat of something enormous asleep below. The locals called the place haunted, but as the fog thickened and the lake seemed to sigh, Eli wondered, what if it wasn't haunting anyone? What if it was guarding something? That night, the footage replayed on a loop inside Eli's tent. Every time the video reached that moment, that impossible glimpse of light, he froze. The shadows beneath the surface seemed to shift each time, as if aware of being watched. His equipment malfunctioned again. Batteries drained faster than they should. Outside, fog rolled in waves against the tent walls. There was no sound but the faint tapping of water droplets. Eli whispered to himself that there had to be an explanation. Refraction, a current, maybe even a trick of light. Yet deep down, something in his chest ached with the certainty that the lake had seen him too. Morning came gray and cold. The forest was hushed, every branch dripping with dew. Eli walked back to the dock, each footstep echoing faintly against the stillness. The lake looked too calm, unnaturally smooth, like glass poured over something alive. He raised the drone once more, determined to see it again. The machine rose steadily into the air, its buzzing soft against the silence. Then halfway across the lake, the compass spun uncontrollably. Static screamed through the feed. And just before the connection dropped, a faint pulse of blue light shimmered far below, like something breathing in the dark. By afternoon, clouds gathered low and heavy over the water. Eli hiked around the lake's edge for a higher vantage point. The woods felt ancient, roots gnarled, earth spongy, air thick with silence. From a ridge overlooking the lake, he aimed his camera. Through the lens, he saw concentric waves moving outward from the center, rhythmic and measured. Then a shimmer, faint but unmistakable, glowed deep beneath the surface. The pulse matched his heartbeat. And in that moment, a thought crept into his mind that he couldn't ignore. The lake wasn't reflecting the sky. It was responding to him. That night, he tried to pack up and leave. But the mist grew thicker, swallowing the tree line, muting the world to nothing but soft dripping and the faint hum of insects. As Eli sealed his camera case, a low light glowed under the water, pale blue, pulsing gently. He froze. The glow spread across the surface in veins, tracing the shape of something immense beneath. Then, without a sound, it vanished. Eli stood motionless, heart pounding. The water rippled once, softly, as if something beneath had turned over in its sleep. From across the lake, a single hollow bloop echoed back. The next morning, Eli drove into the nearest town, a cluster of leaning wooden buildings on the edge of the forest called Briar Hollow. The streets were empty except for a few rusted trucks and a stray dog trotting through the mist. Inside the diner, eyes followed him as soon as he mentioned the lake. The conversations died mid-sentence. The waitress placed his coffee down without a word and walked away. No one wanted to talk about Blackwater. An old map hung on the wall behind the counter, the lake smaller, a river winding through where it now stands. Eli traced it with his finger. A handwritten note in faded ink marked one spot. Old Hollow, lost beneath flood, 1973. When he turned, a woman stood behind him, watching quietly. "You filmed out there, didn't you?" she asked. Then you've already seen them. Maeve Lorne invited Eli to the small local museum she managed, a converted schoolhouse with dusty glass cases and faded photographs. She unlocked a drawer and slid out a stack of yellowed newspaper clippings. Flood drowns Valley Town. 37 dead. The headlines told of a dam failure, but Maeve shook her head. That's what they printed. But that flood, it wasn't water alone that came up from the ground. Eli frowned, reading a name repeated across multiple reports. The Hollow Church. Maeve's voice lowered. They said the bells rang days after the town went under. Divers heard them deep below. They never found the church, or the divers. Her eyes flicked toward the window. Some say it's still ringing, just under the surface. Later that day, Eli walked to the sheriff's office, a single-story brick building with one flickering fluorescent light above the door. Sheriff Dale Harlan listened in silence as Eli played a short clip from his drone footage. The sheriff's face didn't change, but his fingers drummed the desk. When the light beneath the water appeared on the screen, he shut the laptop abruptly. "You need to delete that," Harlan said. "You think you found something new, but we've known about that lake for 50 years. We leave it alone. It leaves us alone," Eli pressed, asking what had been covered up. The sheriff looked him dead in the eye and replied, "The people who built the dam buried more than a town down there." Then, quieter, and it's still alive. Eli left the office shaken. The wind carried a faint metallic smell from the direction of the lake. He drove back toward Blackwater as night fell, headlights slicing through drifting fog. Every mile closer, the radio filled with static, then whispers that almost sounded like his own voice. When he stopped the truck near the tree line, he saw the lake again, motionless, yet breathing faintly beneath the mist. He stepped out, holding his camera. The air felt charged, electric. A faint chime echoed from across the water, soft, distant, like a bell ringing under miles of stone. It came again, and again. Maeve's warning whispered back to him. They said the bells rang for days. That night, Eli sat in his tent again, surrounded by maps, notebooks, and the hum of failing batteries. On his screen, he overlaid the 1973 flood map with his drone footage. The coordinates aligned perfectly. Where the glow pulsed underwater, that was where the church once stood. As the realization sank in, a faint vibration shook the ground beneath him. Subtle, but distinct. The ripples on his cup of water shimmered outward, steady, rhythmic. He stepped outside, camera in hand. The lake was darker than ever, but deep beneath the surface, a pulse of light flickered once, then again, then faster, as if responding to his presence. And through the fog, from somewhere far below, came the faint sound of bells. The third evening came heavy with fog. The lake was still, its surface reflecting a bruised violet sky. Eli set up his tripod on the dock. Every motion deliberate, mechanical. But his mind raced. He replayed Maeve's words again and again. The bells rang days after it went under. Now he wanted to hear them for himself. The air was colder than before. The woods behind him were silent, not even a single insect calling. As his drone lifted off once more, he whispered, "Just one more flight." The feed flickered instantly. Faint bursts of static, then brief clarity. The lake below glowed like a sleeping pulse beneath frost. Eli steadied the camera, waiting. For the first time, the drone's reflection on the water didn't match its movement. The mirrored drone hovered a second longer, and then slowly sank out of sight. Back in the cabin he'd rented near the lake, Eli watched the live drone feed on his laptop. The signal was unstable, frames cutting in and out like breathing. Then, from the static, a shape appeared. It wasn't the reflection this time. It was a structure. The faint outline of a roof, a tower, maybe a steeple. He leaned closer, heart hammering. Beneath the rippling silt, the submerged town appeared in flashes. Rooftops, fences, even a street light frozen in darkness. Then, movement. Something glided past the lens, almost human in shape, arms outstretched, drifting sideways. Another followed. Their eyes shimmered faint gold, blinking open as if awakening to the light above. Eli slammed the laptop shut, but the reflection on the window glass still showed the shapes moving. Eli called Maeve in a panic. His voice shook as he told her about the faces, the church, the shapes that moved as if alive. There was silence on the other end. Then Maeve whispered, "If you saw them, it means they saw you too." She told him not to return to the lake. Not tonight, not ever. But Eli couldn't stop. He needed proof. He needed the world to see what lay beneath. As he stepped outside, the night seemed unnaturally still. The fog no longer drifted. It waited. The faint chime of bells carried across the water again. Closer this time. Eli raised his camera toward the sound, but the mist thickened so fast it swallowed the lens. Only one word made it through the static on Maeve's voicemail. "Run!" By midnight, Eli was back at the lake. His flashlight beam cut through the fog like a blade, revealing ripples spreading across the surface, though no wind stirred. He launched the drone one final time. The hum echoed over the water as it rose into darkness. On the monitor, the feed came alive, clearer than ever. The drowned town stretched beneath the surface like a sleeping giant. Windows shimmered. Something swayed between the buildings. Not current, not debris. A figure, long hair, drifting, eyes open, staring directly at the drone. More appeared, dozens, all facing upward. Their mouths moved, soundless, but the lake began to vibrate with a low hum. The water pulsed once. The drone lights dimmed. The feed turned white. When the feed returned, Eli stared in disbelief. The drone camera was underwater. It drifted slowly through the drowned streets, past submerged rooftops and lampposts covered in silt. Then it stopped before a massive shape rising from the lakebed. A building intact, with tall arched windows and a cracked bell tower. The hollow church. Inside the open doorway, a light pulsed steadily, slow and warm like a heartbeat. For a moment, it seemed to respond to his breath, pulsing faster when he leaned in. The drone's battery flashed red. Before it died, one final image came through. A figure standing in the doorway, head tilted, eyes reflecting gold through the darkness. Then the signal cut. The screen went black. By dawn, Eli's footage had spread across online forums, brief clips of glowing shapes beneath the water. He hadn't uploaded them, but somehow they'd leaked. Dozens of users claimed they heard whispers in the audio track. One message stood out. "Don't go near the church," Maeve called him hours later, her voice low. "Come to the archives." Now, when Eli arrived, she led him down a narrow hallway, lined with filing cabinets and damp walls. "What you saw wasn't supposed to resurface," she said. "They tried to seal it." She pulled a dusty folder from a locked drawer labeled Project Seraphim, 1973. Inside were blueprints of the dam, schematics of tunnels leading beneath the lake, and grainy photos of men in hazmat suits lowering something into the pit. "What were they burying?" Eli asked. Maeve whispered, "It wasn't a town they flooded. It was a doorway." Maeve laid out photographs across the table. Black and white images showed a construction site, the same valley where the lake now sat. Men in hard hats stood beside a deep, circular shaft. In later photos, the shaft was covered with thick concrete slabs and the newly built dam. They said the water would purify the ground. Maeve muttered, but it wasn't purification, it was containment. She slid one last image toward him. A grainy frame of something massive, half buried in mud. Metallic, ribbed, and faintly glowing. They called it the vessel. No one knew what it was. The team that found it disappeared within a week. Eli stared at the photo, realizing the glow matched what he'd seen under the lake. "It's still active," he whispered. "Still breathing." Maeve nodded slowly. "And now it knows you've found it." They moved deeper into the building, where old county blueprints and government files lay sealed in crates. The air smelled of dust and iron. Maeve unlatched a crate, marked environmental records, restricted. Inside was a weathered reel of microfilm. She loaded it into a projector, the bulb flickering before revealing distorted footage. The lake before the flood, the church standing tall, and something moving behind it. It wasn't human. The frame caught a glimpse of long limbs, too thin, rising from the ground like roots in reverse. The camera shook violently before cutting to black. Eli backed away from the projector. That thing was already there, before the flood. Maeve nodded. The water didn't drown it, Eli. It kept it asleep. The footage ended abruptly. The bulb popped, plunging the room into half-darkness. For a moment there was silence. Then a faint humming from somewhere beneath the floor. Maeve's hands trembled as she grabbed Eli's arm. "It's waking." The humming deepened, like a resonant chord felt through the bones. Papers fluttered off the table. The old light fixture swayed. Maeve whispered, "That sound. That's the same frequency they recorded before the flood." Eli checked his recorder. The decibel meter spiked rhythmically, pulsing like a heartbeat. Outside, the fog pressed tight against the windows, glowing faintly blue. He looked to Maeve. "If it wakes completely, what happens?" Her voice shook. Then the water won't hold it anymore. Outside, night had fully fallen. The fog over Blackwater Lake pulsed with blue light that mirrored the rhythm in Eli's recordings. He stood at the edge of the forest, beside Maeve, both staring down toward the distant water. "They thought the flood would bury it forever," she said softly. "But the lake isn't a tomb, it's a seal." The sound grew louder, rolling through the earth. Somewhere out on the lake, a bell tolled once, then again deeper and slower than before. The water rippled outward, forming perfect circles that glowed for a moment before fading. Eli whispered, "It's calling." Maeve closed her eyes. "No, it's remembering." The trees shuddered as the light beneath the surface brightened, illuminating the drowned valley below. The air around Blackwater felt heavier now. Charged, alive. Each breath Eli took seemed to echo faintly, as though the lake inhaled with him. Maeve begged him not to go back, but the obsession had already taken root. The footage wasn't enough. He needed to see it with his own eyes. He spent the day building a waterproof rig, a heavy steel case lined with lights, and a live feed tethered to his laptop. When night fell, fog rolled in thick as smoke. Maeve stood at the tree line, watching silently as he prepared the winch. "If it's guarding something," she said, "you have to ask if you're meant to find it." Eli didn't answer. The camera slipped into the water with a soft splash. The feed flickered, then stabilized, showing the slow descent into blackness. The underwater feed revealed nothing at first, just silt, drifting like smoke, particles dancing in the light beams. Then, the deeper the camera sank, the stranger the motion became. Sand seemed to lift and fall rhythmically, as if breathing. Each pulse sent clouds of debris swirling upward. Eli's fingers tightened on the controls. "It's moving," he whispered. Maeve stared at the screen. Lips trembled. The depth gauge flashed. 70 feet. 90. Then, faint light appeared below, shifting with each pulse. Through the static, a shape began to emerge. Rib-like structures jutting from the lake bed, arranged in a perfect circle. Maeve whispered, "That's not rock. That's bone." Eli adjusted the focus, the camera tilting slowly across the circular formation. It wasn't a creature's skeleton. It was architecture. Massive curved pillars, stretching upward like the ribs of some cathedral. Between them, faint carvings marked the stone, spirals, symbols, patterns resembling eyes. Maeve whispered that the church had been built atop this structure long before the flood. They didn't build over it, she said. They built to it. The feed shook violently. Static flared. From the corner of the frame, a faint shimmer passed. Translucent, humanoid, moving gracefully through the water. The light dimmed. For one moment, the camera caught its face. Not decayed, not monstrous, but sorrowful. Then the feed cut to black. The connection reestablished suddenly. The camera lay tilted on the lake bed, lens half buried in silt. Through the murky view, the breathing sand continued to rise and fall, each pulse now stronger, shaking small rocks loose. The vibrations grew deeper, resonant, like the echo of a massive lung beneath the earth. Eli's laptop trembled on the table. Maeve backed away, clutching the edge of the tent. "It's waking," she whispered. The light beneath the surface brightened into a soft, rhythmic glow. And then, faint, almost tender, a sound drifted through the speaker, a single chime, like a bell underwater. Eli's hands shook. He whispered, "It's not angry. It's remembering." The camera's tether tightened suddenly, pulled downward by unseen force. Eli grabbed the reel, shouting for Maeve to help. The cable hissed as it slid through the winch, glowing faintly from friction. Then it snapped. The feed erupted in static. For a brief second, a single frame appeared, an enormous shape unfurling beneath the sand. Circular, luminous, expanding like an opening eye. Then nothing. Silence fell. The lake went still again. Eli stared at the blank screen, chest heaving. Maeve stepped forward, her voice breaking. "You've woken it!" From the water's edge came a single ripple, spreading outward, slow, deliberate, impossibly wide. Eli whispered, "It's rising." The night after the cable snapped, the town of Briar Hollow trembled. People woke to the sound of distant thunder. Though the sky was clear, Eli drove back toward the lake with Maeve beside him, headlights cutting through fog that glowed faintly from within. Every few seconds, the car's dashboard lights flickered. Static whispered through the radio, faint at first, then forming words that matched Eli's voice, repeating his own sentences back to him. Maeve stared ahead, whispering a prayer under her breath. When they reached the shore, the water was already moving. The lake's surface rose and fell in slow rhythm, like the chest of something breathing beneath. Each pulse sent ripples all the way to their feet. The fog above the water shimmered in concentric rings of light. Maeve murmured, "It's not waking up. It's remembering how." From across the lake, the bell tolled again. Louder now, resonating through the trees like a heartbeat wrapped in metal. The sound shook the leaves from their branches, each chime slower, heavier. The fog swirled violently as the light beneath the surface expanded. Eli lifted his camera, filming through the haze. For the first time, the outline of the sunken town was visible from above, rooftops shimmering like shadows beneath glass. Something enormous moved between them, displacing silt in long, spiraling trails. The old church spire broke the surface for a split second before sinking again. Maeve whispered, "The town's rising." Eli kept filming, trembling. "No," he said quietly. "It's surfacing." And from the center of the lake, a ring of light burst upward, a silent explosion beneath the fog. Electricity surged through the air. Power lines along the road flickered and went dark. The hum grew louder, resonating deep within their bones. Eli's drone, still lying in the truck bed, powered on by itself. Lights blinking red, motors spinning to life. It rose slowly into the air, camera turning toward the lake as if drawn by command. On its live feed, the lake no longer looked like water. The surface was glass, reflecting stars that didn't exist, constellations moving in spirals. At the center, where the church once stood, a circular opening began to form. The fog above it collapsed inward, twisting into a vortex of pale blue light. Maeve clutched Eli's arm, voice trembling. The doorway. It's open again. The vortex tightened. The sound of the bell grew continuous now. Not single tolls, but a sustained metallic hum vibrating through the air. The forest behind them bent under the invisible pressure, trees leaning toward the lake as if drawn to its call. Eli steadied his camera, capturing everything. Shapes moved beneath the surface. Silhouettes like human forms drifting upward, their eyes faintly gold. As they neared the surface, the water didn't break. It parted smoothly, forming a mirror around them. They hovered, suspended between two worlds, reflections moving out of sync. Maeve fell to her knees, whispering, "They're not ghosts. They're echoes." Eli's voice cracked. "Echoes of what?" Her answer came softly. "Of who they were. Before it opened, the light intensified until it seemed to consume the fog entirely. The entire lake pulsed once, a single vast heartbeat that rattled the ground beneath their feet. Eli's camera feed went white, then slowly faded back in to reveal the truth. The drowned town was shifting. Buildings tilted, drifting upward as if gravity itself had reversed. The bell tower tore free of the mud, rising toward the light. Inside, through the swirling debris, Eli saw something colossal unfurling. Long arcs of light, like wings made of glass and bone. It wasn't a creature. It was the shape of a thought. Ancient, endless, alive. Maeve whispered, voice breaking. "It's remembering the flood." Eli lowered the camera. Eli lowered the camera. "Realization dawning. No," he said, trembling. "It's remembering us." The storm began without wind. The lake glowed brighter than the moon, waves forming in perfect circles that rolled outward and vanished against the shore. Eli couldn't stop filming. His breath came fast, camera shaking in his hands. Maeve pleaded with him to leave, to let the lake seal itself again. But he'd come too far. "If I walk away now, no one will ever believe it," he said. He strapped a harness around his chest, clipped the tether line, and turned toward the water. Maeve whispered something, maybe a prayer, maybe his name. But her voice was lost in the deep, rhythmic hum now rising from below. As Eli stepped into the water, it was warm, pulsing softly against his legs, almost welcoming. He looked back once, nodded, and vanished into the light. The camera's feed followed him downward. At first there was only shimmering light, the lake no longer murky, but luminous, like descending through liquid glass. Eli's breathing echoed softly through the transmit. Then faint outlines appeared, rooftops suspended in the glow, lampposts bending as if caught in slow current. He drifted lower until the church came into view. The bell tower now upright, the doorway wide open. The golden glow inside flickered like a candle at the bottom of the world. Every instinct told him to rise, but curiosity pulled him closer. He reached the threshold and lifted his light toward the doorway. The carvings along the walls matched the same spirals from the blueprints, repeating eyes, watching him descend. Inside, the church was still intact. Pews drifted weightlessly, covered in silt and algae that shimmered gold in the light. The bell hung motionless above, its metal surface vibrating faintly. Eli aimed his camera at the altar, or what had been one. The stone had cracked open, revealing a pit that pulsed with the same blue light as the lake. Shapes floated within the glow, not bodies, but memories. Flickers of faces, voices, movements, the townspeople of Old Hollow repeating their final moments before the flood. They weren't haunting the lake. They were trapped in its memory. Eli whispered through his recorder, voice shaking, "It's not death down here. It's remembrance." The light beneath the altar grew brighter, expanding outward like a pulse of thought. Eli's camera began to shake. The water trembled. Through the widening glow, something enormous moved. Not in violence, but in slow, deliberate awareness. The sand lifted, swirling upward, as if drawn by breath. The camera's focus struggled, catching glimpses, vast arches of translucent material curving through the dark, and beneath them, a surface like glass that reflected nothing. Then it turned, a movement too large to be seen all at once. A single luminous eye opened in the depths, golden and endless. For a heartbeat, it looked directly into the lens. Then softly a whisper came through the audio. His own name. On shore, Maeve watched the feed from Eli's monitor. His voice came through the speaker once, calm, awed. It remembers us. Then, static. The screen flickered, light filling every pixel, and for a moment she saw it too. The immense, radiant eye, filling the entire frame. Then, the signal cut. The lake erupted in light so bright it burned through the fog and into the clouds. The earth shook once, like a great exhale. Then silence. When dawn came, the lake was still again. Perfectly flat. No trace of Eli, no ripple, no glow. But sometimes locals say when the fog rolls in and the water trembles softly, the lake reflects two skies, one above and one far below, blinking slowly in the dark.